Welcome to the Community Government Workshop. Thank you. So the idea behind this workshop is to connect the community government people on campus, which is the members of ComCil A and B, to the institutional memory and wisdom of people who were very involved in community government in their time at Antioch. There's been a bit of a hiatus in institutional memory with the closing and the reopening, and there haven't been that many occasions for students to learn from people who, from their peers and from their elders, who have had all of that accumulated experience. So this is meant to be a bridge and a discussion, and the way it's going to go is that we have Elijah is the chair of ComCil B, Marcel is the chair of ComCil A, they're newly elected. Angel and Ken are members of ComCil B. They're going to explain to you what ComCil B and ComCil A are in a minute. So they're going to explain what is the state of community government at Antioch now and what are the challenges for this year. And then they're going to have feedback from experienced former community managers from the 90s and the 2000s who had very prominent role in community government in their time on campus, and who are also very skilled organizers now. And then we can, after this dialogue, we can open the discussion to the general audience, and then we can all have a community discussion together.
All right, so I'm Elijah. I'm the chair of ComCil B. And so in the past year, what we've been trying to do is kind of reform community governance to be more democratic and be more open to the whole of the community and to get people engaged. One of the largest issues that I think our campus faces right now is a significant disconnect and a significant feeling of apathy towards what community governance is. And so in that vein, we feel like ComCil, as it exists now, wasn't serving its purpose. And so what we've decided to do is we've broken into two groups. ComCil A is Marcel, and ComCil A is doing all the day-to-day and the legislative work that would normally be done by ComCil. So, policy changes to, what might be in the student handbook or something like that is handled by ComCil. ComCil A facilitates community meetings. Everything that ComCil would normally do is done by ComCil A. ComCil B is essentially a visionary and redesign group. Our goal is to, in the next essentially year, completely redesign what community governance is intended to be at Antioch, and essentially create a new structure that would be implemented to replace what ComCil was before. Our ComCil is a little bit different than the ComCils you might have known, at least even as it exists now, and that's why we've got some folks here that can kind of help answer questions or help ask questions that people might have in the audience. So just kind of have a facilitated discussion about what it is and what we do. Do you have anything you'd like to add to that?
That was perfect.
Great. So I think essentially, ComCil B is kind of interesting because we're new. We haven't met yet. We are meeting for the first time next week. But like I said before, our goal is essentially to kind of redesign community governance as a whole. So maybe Marcel, since you're the chair of ComCil A, you could speak to some of the challenges that you've faced as ComCil, getting people engaged, getting people involved in ComCil, and maybe why ComCil as it exists might fall short of being what it could.
All right. So one of the biggest challenges that we've seen is a big disenfranchisement of communication, of involvement, and decision making across campus. Real meaningful student participation all across campus. And so one of ComCil's biggest agendas is pushing forward, and with the help of ComCil B, creating the structures to handle student participation on every level, from renovating and bringing back community management programs for student involvement with committees. Right now, we are pretty small, especially for this summer quarter. So now we're able to try things and scale to size when new classes come on for fall quarter and when classes on co-op come on. So outside of that, communication, bridging the gaps. A lot of times, especially now, even inter-departments, communication and what Antioch's problems are looks very different depending on who you ask and what their active role is in the community. So part of that is going to have to be identifying exactly what we are, who we are, what does our problems look like, and creating some congruency between that. So one of the ideas that we were coming up with that we're going to probably be talking about later was a student assembly time for students to be caught up with conversations, dialogue, issues on campus that are often overlooked or sent in an email where deliberation is taking place throughout the weeks, and after the fact, once that decision is made, we finally are given information about that. So constantly being in the conversation.
Also, like issues have been not just with students, but with faculty and staff, because it's community governance that involves every demographic of the community, faculty, staff, and students. And there have been issues with kind of feeling siloed in certain areas of the community, so that staff, it's really hard to get staff and faculty to run for ComCil because they're already overworked, students are already overworked. When we have elections, oftentimes we have to run a special election in the middle of the quarter because a seat hasn't been filled, because there just wasn't enough, and we couldn't garner enough interest in that short time period that we have. Our quarters are 11 weeks. If you have an election at a certain point and something goes wrong, or you don't have enough people, it's really hectic to do all the things that we need to accomplish as a governing body in the short time that we have. Frustrations have also been that faculty and staff haven't been able to do the focus on the issues that are important to them, because it's a very student heavy body as in the past few quarters it's been student heavy, even though there hasn't been a lot of interest across the board. It was still mostly students running and students doing things. So there are issues about that. And so I think the aim with ComCil B is to really try to garner interest, but also examine the needs of the community, examine the needs of across demographics, right? So that even though I'm a student, I also want to know what are my professors talking about, what are their needs, and how can they be fully incorporated in governance so that they can advocate for their needs at every level. How can the staff feel comfortable participating in governance, and how can students actually have agency over decision making? A lot of what Marcelo's talking about is that students don't feel like they're real citizens in this community. And so trying to use ComCil B as this opportunity that we don't have often, because this is like a year-long thing that goes across quarters. So we have that time so we can set that intentionality to do things and to try things and experiment, but do it in the best way possible so that there's like an organized plan moving forward in the years to come for what governance can look like. Because with the reopening, there's just a new thing every time. When classes graduated, we lost that institutional memory that the class of 2015 brought, that the class of 2016 brought, class of 2017. And so really what this is kind of cultivating what we need moving forward, so that we have a system of truly shared governance that lasts for decades, not just a year or two. And really building governance that lasts, that supports the demographics on campus, but also really enriches the community. Because if we have a community government that nobody wants to be a part of, that's not a community government. That's just this random thing that is useless. And I don't want community government to be useless. So I'm really excited about the opportunities that we can bring with this endeavor. And if ComCil B ends up, if we examine everything and we decide at the end of the year that the way we've been doing things is the right way, we can do that. We have the freedom to make decisions that are best for the community and get everyone else's input, which doesn't happen all the time. So it's pretty cool.
Should we?
Are we allowed to have questions?
We're going to open to question in after a certain point in the meeting. At first, it's going to be a dialogue between the panel, so I'm going to pass the microphone to the community managers. Do they have any feedback to what they've heard from the ComCil B students?
Sure. Y'all are amazing. It is an honor to share space with you and to see the work that you all have been doing, and that extends, to the whole community. But the leadership that you're taking and the risks that you're taking and the critical, engaged thought that you're putting into all of this and heart is just mind-blowing. I just wanted to better understand how history maybe is being communicated and how the role of community government is being shared in an institutional level. I think, going back to Algo Henderson and his proclamation and declaration of love for community government and his idea of this being really a laboratory for democracy seems to me to be, we were talking earlier with some alumni, what is it that Antioch does well, so many things, but what is it uniquely about Antioch? What is unique about Antioch that really sets it apart from other maybe liberal arts colleges who are also very successful? And it's that we have, I think, it's really the shared governance. I think it's learning how to responsibly mediate relationships of power within a community, and to kind of think back to what Derek Johnson was saying, the keynote speaker earlier, that our future, like the sustainability of movements and of justice and integrity for people is really in part being engaged in the political systems. And I can say that there's nothing that taught me better about engaging in civic engagement in political systems in my time here at Antioch. I just recently graduated from Case Western Reserve University master's program in applied social sciences with a focus in community organizing, community practice for social change. And I was light years ahead of, and I graduated 10 years ago, and the curriculum was so behind Antioch. Folks within the institution were amazed at these ideas that I was bringing to the table that seemed very kind of ordinary to me because I went to Antioch and they were part of it. So I just see not only a benefit in the institution operating in a way that really operationalizes justice by sharing power and sharing governance. So, but right, that's what democracy is. That's what, that should be the ideals that we're always striving for, that in any community or any organization, those who are most impacted are leading efforts. It's led by the community. We know that in social work best practices. We know that in organizing best practices, and that's how Antioch has operated under its best practice. So I have this idea of shared governance throughout Antioch's history, and I'm wondering what the role of community government is maybe understood on campus here, and maybe how it's been communicated.
Does anyone here want to take that, or should?
Okay, so
What I was going to say is that largely, people come to Antioch without a solid understanding of what ComCil is or what community governance is in general. We have the structures in the institution set up, but when you're first here, when you come onto campus, that's not really covered or explained in any kind of substantial way. Some of the ideas that people have had to kind of tackle that is creating something like an Antioch 101 class, which requires civic engagement, gives credit for civic engagement, so people are almost, required to be a part of the political systems here in order to kind of engage with them more, because, like I said before, the disenfranchisement is a large issue. And I think that disenfranchisement on campus is largely coming from the fact that there isn't a great introduction to it, and there's not a great understanding of it, and so people are largely kind of alienated from the structures themselves, and so you can kind of see that apathy. In our last election, we had a candidate that ran as kind of like character, a rooster on the farm, and so Glenn the rooster ran for ComCil because that was one of the few ways that people found the structures even accessible, and that's like one of the few. That's one of our few candidates that actually ran because there's so many people that are been disengaged and uneducated on what ComCil actually is.
I also think that it was just like for me, I didn't understand what ComCil was until maybe midway through my second year. And so it really became something that was like at least communicated as, yeah, we have shared governance, but there was like no gateway to understanding what that was. And we had something in orientation about it, but I barely remember most of what orientation was about, as like a rising fourth year at this point, you know? So I think what we could have done better is having sustainable systems of like introducing community government, like when you're a first year, when you're a second year, when you're like ongoing, so that really when you get here, but also when you're a fourth year, you can still have an opportunity to take part and understand. But I think that we've just had a rough time because we don't have the time, you know, to invest in like this. It's an ideal, it's not a reality all the time. And oftentimes community government is also seen as like student government. So like if the students are doing something, staff and faculty might not feel like they have as much claim over the community, because when we have our like events, committee budget or whatever, or anything, it's kind of geared mostly towards student. When we have our revenue, like for this year, our budget comes from students paying CG fees. We don't have staff and faculty paying CG fees, it's just us. So then, like, when we're the ones paying the fees, we're the ones who are kind of like, oh yeah, we have claim, we have ownership over this thing. And so I think people don't feel like they can own community government, people don't feel like they have autonomy over it, and they don't really understand what it is until later. And it kind of feels like the people that do get involved and that do take part, it ends up being a cycle where it's like the same people running, the same people interested, and then it kind of becomes like a cycle. And so there's just been, in the past few years, just a hard time communicating things and also being consistent and implementing like shared governance, like workshops and stuff like that.
By way of introduction, is this working? Yeah. My name's April Wolford. I was the community manager in 1991. I actually just figured that out. And I literally, I had it wrong. I told some people the wrong date. But it was 1991, and that was the year that the sexual offense policy arose and sort of came to life. Some of the problems that you are articulating are very similar to issues that we struggle with, and that in terms of community organizing is a perpetual challenge to get people involved, to help them feel, empowered by the system and whatnot. But the unique thing to me about Antioch's community governance model is that it has included the staff and the faculty as well as students. But over time, even when I was the community manager, faculty were not that engaged. They had their own senate by that point, and they had sort of separated out their interests to be just faculty interests. So their role in community government was fairly limited. So we were also struggling to figure out how to involve them in the process as well as the staff, because they could lend consistency and hold history more effectively than students can, right? You're here for a discrete period of time, you're on co-op occasionally, so they could hold the continuity of the issues and really invest in that. But it sounds to me, and it was the problem for us too, how can community council, a community government, serve the needs of the faculty and the staff and the students? So what are the needs that that group has that are concerned with governance? And what is their relationship to governance, right? And that's another thing I just wanted to help you guys reflect on. And I think it's wise you've chosen to separate that so that the ongoing work can continue, but you also have capacity to dream and re-envision. So it seems to me that's a really good way to go about it. And I mean, in terms of visioning, one of the ways I think about it is the difference between government and governance is significant and worthy of exploring, right? Because government is a structure. So how much structure do you need to complete the work of the governance, which is the making decisions and prioritizing and addressing the needs of the community, right? So that's one thing I would encourage you to sort of dwell on, and I continue to do that to this day. I mean, it's really interesting. To me, governance is the important part. The structure really should exist to support that, and not for its own sake. Also, I had some questions about, we had the Honor Code and the Civil Liberties Code that are impressive. I mean, to me, those are works that were created by generations of Antiochians, refined over time. And in fact, to tell you how relevant I think they are, I live out in Oakland, but I'm involved in a lot of different queer community activisms, and there's a lot of issues of consent that people are wrestling with in all kinds of communities. Well, I seem to have some background in that particular area. Actually, I told some friends of mine at the time, I was like, you won't believe this, but I'm involved in a consent policy development. And they were like, they just fell out laughing. But out of that, so I took, what did we need to do? I mean, there was so much animosity, so much anger around these issues with these folks. I literally took the Civil Liberties Code, the Honor Code, the SOPP, and I sat down and I drafted something I called an Honor Code. Or, I mean, I call it a code of conduct. Calling out what are behaviors that are acceptable, what are behaviors that are unacceptable, but it just blended all of these kind of ideas into something that felt like it was contemporary. So when you have that documentation, that kind of history, perhaps reviewing those things and the processes that those documents were developed with will give you strategies for how to revision what this looks like. And I'm also happy to share with you the document that we came up with. I know you're signing some things now, but it's a high level, right, to hold people to a high standard and to ensure they're committed. And then last thing, and I'll send it off to Shelley, is that is there a faculty senate?
There's like faculty
Assembly, it's a faculty assembly,
A faculty assembly?
that's what it's called, but it's
Oh,
the
I
same
see.
thing, yeah.
Okay, and that's a decision-making body? Do they make policy for academics and for personnel, for staff and things like that, or faculty? Yes,
So
it's more of a traditional.
they make some for the faculty through the faculty committees, there's also an academic affairs administrative one that bridges some of those, and some things we have to go to assembly for, and then they do curriculum policy.
Do they ever bring issues to ComCil?
In your experience.
But does the faculty ever bring anything to council?
Are faculty concerns brought to ComCil for consideration or to be addressed or debated?
There aren't currently.
Yeah.
So that's one of the things also where we see an opportunity to bridge gaps, especially with our student assembly, which right now we're partially redefining our curriculum. And I think that a lot of input, a lot of understanding of what the students are looking for, what the teachers want to teach, and the faculty want to instruct. I think that's an opportunity right now that we're looking at in terms of building a relationship.
So it might be a way to work with the faculty to figure out which elements could be brought to
Could you
ComCil.
please talk into the microphone?
Yeah. Also, we have faculty that sit on ComCil, A, that provide input on things. But in the year that I've been on ComCil, I haven't had policy specifically from the faculty brought forward. And so probably there could be work in ComCil B where we can work with faculty to see while we're investigating what their needs are, also seeing whether or not there are ways that we can better integrate their roles into governance so that it's not a matter of well, we have to go here in this other body and then go to this other body, making it more straightforward and streamlined. So it's easier and it's not as disorganized and complicated. Because I also think faculty might be like, well, if I can just go to faculty assembly, I might not need to go share this with other groups or stuff inside.
I think my thoughts on that are really connected to what you're saying. So my name is Shelby. I'm a class of 2005. I'm a current trustee on the board, and I was a community manager in 05 and 06. So it was right after the Renewal Commission had finalized its plan, and shortly before it sort of became kind of known that the college would likely start heading in a direction of closure if things didn't change. And I entered Antioch the year that Bob Devine stepped down as president, and the chief financial officer went from the college to the university control. So my first community meeting was on a Friday night. It was 9 o'clock at night, and there was like 300 students shouting at the CFO, and I was like, wow, this place is crazy. And for me, actually, and this might be a really terrible thing to admit out loud, I didn't really think that ComCil ever had power, because it would sometimes make decisions that the college had to implement, but I quickly saw that ADSIL was where the decisions were made. So, and I sort of made my life about Antioch in a perhaps unhealthy way, and I really didn't leave campus but like 2 semesters the entire time I was here. And I sat on ADSIL from the summer of 2002 till when I left as community manager in 2006. And there was four presidents in that time. And it was crazy to be 19 and be charged with sitting on committees where you would decide faculty tenure, where you would decide the college's budget, and all of these things. And so I've always been struck that since the reopening, it's not been thought that ADSIL should come back in the ways that it was. ComCil, I think, is great. For me, like the handbook, to your point, I mean, I literally have a copy of Antioch's handbook from when I was a student, and I use it in all of my jobs. And if people are like, well, how do you make decisions? I'm like, well, why read this? Because this is a pretty good guide. But by the time I became community manager, and I think at the time Steve Lowry was the president, like ComCil was like a joke. Like people went because they were elected, and we sort of made decisions, but we were treated like children. And the few faculty that remained on it were like, this sucks. The faculty at that point had been so disenfranchised that they had sort of gone off on their own. And Denny, you were there. I was talking with Denny about this last night, that as students we sort of raised a ruckus, and I don't think we thought to partner with the faculty because we viewed them as the enemy, not realizing that essentially they had no power at the moment because the administration was not communicating with them. But like they would have like faculty meeting during community meeting, like intentionally, and I was like, well, this is fucking fucked up. Like I'm the community manager, they're supposed to be here, and they're like off stage in a coup is what I thought. But in reality, it was like, let's like save the minimal resources and control that we have. And to your point, it was like a time when students didn't want to be engaged. Like we would like literally beg students to like participate in things. We would like have secret meetings where we take like 10 students who seemed to know what they were doing and be like, okay, well the president's gonna do this, so we need to do something against it. Da, 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 da. It was bad. I think one time I convinced Avery and Levi Cowperthwaite to like stage a coup at like an alumni dinner because I wanted the alumni to know how bad the college was becoming. You know, and the president just got pissed, so then our response to that was like, let's wheat paste his house. That worked out well. You know, like at that point we'd sort of lost all semblance of order, and we're really functioning like little rogue Antiochians. I mean, not really different than now. But I was still struck by how much power, because when I went to graduate school and I learned that you had to call people professor, I was like, what is that about? I literally got looked at like, you just called me by my first name? What in the... But the fact that we didn't have a say in anything was like so odd to me. I was like, what do you mean you can't see the budget and you can't approve it? And frankly, I think there was times where they did do very little to instruct us as students or as community managers, but I think the things that to me are frankly more important in the governance structure are ADSIL, because it's actually advising the Board of Trustees as to what they need to be doing. And you know, in my time, I think Joan Stramanis was really the only president that used ADSIL. Yeah. She would make decisions with ADSIL and then communicate that to the board, you know, and no, Joan, I think, was at the college as the president for 2 years. And then there was a slew of presidents. And then, like, CG, they literally, I mean, that was probably the hardest job of my entire life, and I've had a lot of hard jobs, but I got all this gray hair from that.
Me too.
Seriously. I mean, it was hard. Like, I had to take, like, a good 3-year, like, do not talk to me about Antioch, because it was terrible, but they held everything together. There was one person whose job it was to make sure all these things were convened every year, and the fact that it now appears to rely solely on students, you all are kicking ass, don't get me wrong, but there needs to be, like, continuity for the people that stay on after your seats expire. And frankly, I didn't come to Antioch, I chose Antioch because I saw queer people on the website. I knew nothing about co-op, I knew nothing about shared governance. I was like, maybe I'm a progressive person. My mind was blown, and what I learned there is in governance and in, like, literal fights with my peers and with faculty and with staff was probably the biggest learning experience of my entire life. So I don't think it's my job to tell you all what to do ever, but, like, ADSL, huge. Like, CG, like a staff person that's in the budget of the college, that's paid for by everyone's dues, huge. And then you can get a van, because we used to have a van, we'd, like, drive around town, it was so fun. And we'd drive around. You can do stupid shit too. It was, like, life-changing, like, truly life-changing. Like, I can literally feel like you could drop me in the middle of nowhere and I could walk back to where I needed to get because of Antioch and because of, like, shared governance and the really messed up but quite profound structure we had, truly.
Is there an ADSL now?
Yeah.
There's no ADSL.
You want to talk about what SLT is though?
Okay, so SLT is this.
Can we get a structure of how it is now? Like,
In response to that, we actually.
How do you get on? How do you have elections? Do you have, I mean, how does it differ from what it was 50 years ago?
Sure, yeah. And so right now we have elections for ComCil A and ComCil B. And those work just like any other ComCil election. Pardon?
How often?
Those happen once per year. And so we have special elections if people need to be elected otherwise, and we have alternate seats for those of people going on co-op. So right now, I am filling in, or I'm not filling in, but I'm going to be here for the next 6 months. And after that, I ran with, like someone by my side who's going to take over from me once I go on co-op.
How is a decision made to have a B?
So the decision was made to have a ComCil B last year because ComCil formed a special projects committee, which was supposed to kind of redesign community governance and present a draft, but largely ComCil was so burdened by the day-to-day activities of kind of working through, hosting community meeting, doing the administrative work, that the special projects committee, and Jennifer Berman actually sat on that, so maybe you could speak to this better, but didn't produce maybe everything that needed to be produced in order to make a full reform of community governance, as I understand it. So B came about to kind of finish the work that special projects started and kind of to move in a different direction.
Should I explain SLT?
Sure, and then the one thing that we do have now, other than, so you guys had ADSL, we have something called the Senior Leadership Team. And so Senior Leadership Team, as I understand it, is the convening of department heads, and Lori, maybe you can clarify this better since I've just kind of joined on, but it's a convening of department heads, and they all have kind of a say in very large decision-making processes. And so there are 2 student seats there.
So like, probably dean of students, like all the deans or the directors of each.
Yeah, that's correct.
Plus it has faculty representatives and student
Yeah.
the community governance representatives, so has students on it.
So both,
And you have 2 now.
the budget of the college is largely determined by the budget committee, correct, Lori?
Well, it's approved by the board, but.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, approved, but
student government, it's not.
we don't have a say in the
So,
budget.
on the budget committee.
But let me be clear, even when there was ADSL, it was like the president would recommend the budget to be approved based on input from ADSL. The Board of Trustees has always approved the budget, which is, I mean, now, not to like toot my own horn, we have a great Board of Trustees, but 10 years, 12 years ago, the board was university people, some of whom were alumni of the college. They certainly did not have the best interest of Antioch College in mind.
Some
As you can
did.
see that they, well, you did, Barbara, but. As a whole, the people that had the best interest did not have the most power, certainly.
Well, does community government have a budget, and what are your functions?
So we do have a budget, and that's set by ComCil. We have a budget chair that is elected to ComCil, and the budget chair kind of deals with the finances there. Maybe you could speak to this better, or maybe you could.
Yeah, so when we have, so community government has, like, last year, I think we have maybe around $50,000 in our budget for the year, and we budget certain, for different functions. We have events committee that deals with events, so dip dance, community day, a bunch of different events that happen throughout the quarter, those are budgeted for. We also have in our budget for the record, so the Antioch Records printing costs, the editors that get paid every quarter, that comes out of our budget. The ComCil chair, the events committee, the space committee, like there's a lot of committees that we manage, and most of those have to get paid for, and most of those, all of that work falls on students and some staff and faculty that sit on those committees. And
Is the government responsible for the physical plan you mentioned?
no, that is
So-
space committee deals with mostly student space, so Weston, which is our student space now, when we have Sontag, going into Sontag and like dealing with those spaces. The physical plant is managed by facilities and the maintenance crew.
So that's not part of community.
So that's not part of community government, that is facilities. And so our budget basically is spent on mostly student services, mostly things that affect, but also things that affect the wider community. And because we are doing all of that work all the time, we don't have enough time to like focus on redesigning community government. Because who has the time to do that when you're trying to make sure that the college is functioning in this capacity, you know, in addition to your academics, if you're a student, or if you're staff or faculty, you have your job, but you also have to sit on committees, or you're also doing X number of things. So it's just really, it was really unsustainable, at least for me. I sat on ComCil when we decided to split the ComCils into A and B, and we just saw that it was just unsustainable to try to put energy into redesigning governance while also doing this other thing, and the same people are doing the same work, and we're already stretched to capacity, and then the quarters go by and I go on co-op and Kent's here, and then you're here, and you know, it's it just seemed better to split the duties so that we have an organized way of restructuring governance, but also providing the vital services that we do to the campus.
We're going to open the floor to the.
We're going to open the floor to the audience, so please raise your hand if you have a question.
We'll take staff.
Okay.
Right here in yellow.
And
Yeah,
yes,
yeah.
and- yes, sir, and the light green shirt.
My name is Santiago. I was community manager in 1968.
Amazing.
And when I was community manager, we had a budget of almost $1 million. And I earned $80 a week. The rest of it went to the activities that we had in the community. At that time, the faculty and the staff were part of community council and ADSO as well. I just want to make one comment and then just ask some questions. One of the things that we learned is that in order to understand the decision-making process, which has nothing to do with the official chart, you need to stay here every semester, because the decisions are made in div change, and they're counting on the lack of continuity between one division and the other. So I just have a few questions. Is your goal direct democracy or representative democracy? First question. Second question, how do you define community? And I would recommend looking at the work of Adolph Reed, who's a Cuban of African descent, who teaches at the University of Pennsylvania, because he says that the concept of community is bogus. Third question, is how do you articulate direct democracy in a neoliberal regime that's the heart of the global empire? What is it that you're trying to do? That's my third question.
These are great, these are great.
And my fourth question is this: does class war end at Route 68, or does it spill over into Center College, East College, and West College Street? And if so, how does that operate here on the campus?
Those are fantastic questions.
And one last comment.
I have to repeat some of these for me because there's
One last comment before I surrender the mic. American universities and colleges are an aberration in terms of Latin America and Africa and Europe, where we have university autonomy since 1922. And you need to look into that history, especially in Cuba, Argentina, and Mexico, where the faculty and the students decide what's going to happen at the university, and then the administration has to take note and implement what the faculty and the students decide. That's been the case in Mexico and Cuba, Argentina in 1922.
So the first question you asked had to deal with whether we or not we want a representative or direct democracy. And so I'm going to again preface by saying that ComCil B hasn't met yet. I can speak as a chair to say that I want something more along the lines of direct democracy, but that has to do with my personal political values, which isn't something that we have united on this campus. And so your next question was, what is our definition of community? And well, I can kind of barely articulate mine, but I think largely across the campus we have different perceptions of what Antioch is, what Antioch could be, and what our values are. And so largely what I've put out to ComCil B thus far is that I want to take kind of a values-based approach in which we really interrogate, what are our values as an institution, and answer the question like, why should we have community governance at all? What purpose are the reforms we're making serving, not just at Antioch, but even past that, as you mentioned. And so by taking that kind of values-based approach and really getting at, what that definition of community might be is the first step to realizing, what kind of democracy might be best for us. And I'm going to have to ask you to repeat a couple of your questions just because.
Never ask an Antioch.
So, I mean, the class war on campus doesn't stop at Route 68, but it's different for a lot of people. So like I said, we don't have a united campus that shares a lot of these values, and I think there's a number of students actually who I would say who are, might even stand on the other side of the class war dependent. But
Really?
it's we've got a really diverse campus. We've got a lot of different views, and so right now it's hard to say that we're all on the same page. And so right now, to a degree, it does kind of stop at Route 68, but we're working on it.
Yeah, it's it's complicated, right? Because every class has a different admissions criteria that they come in under, and so you get a diversity of a range of students. And so when you're talking about the class war, which is loaded topic, to put it shortly, at campus there are mostly at least also comparative from my class was the last class to receive the Horace Mann Fellowship, so our class has a very different demographic than the classes after it, but also at the same time we don't really know, nobody goes and asks who's on the Horace Mann, or who's on this one, or who has this scholarship, because that's not something we pay attention to. It kind of shows up in different ways where most of us work jobs on campus. So there are students that work in the kitchens, there are students that work in housekeeping, students that work in maintenance, students that work in a variety of different offices and jobs. There are also students that don't work. There are also students that don't have a problem going someplace for break or paying for co-op. There are also students that need assistance every single co-op quarter to pay for their job. So or to pay for transportation or housing. So it really differs, and I can't provide a clear answer other than I don't think there is a end point for whatever class war is happening at any point.
then just in response to the last question you asked, what does participatory democracy do in this institution, in this kind of like neoliberal age of higher education? Is that correct? Something like that. So I think that having real participatory democracy and having real involvement means that we're getting the collective of students, the collective of the community, really invested and interested in the institution, the preservation of an institution that's largely dictated. These other institutions are kind of dictated by market forces, as it were. So universities are doing brick and mortar expansions to add all these bells and whistles in order to make it more appealing to students. And I think that if we have a collective and community investment in something like this institution, if we really feel that we're invested in the continuation of something like this, that it can survive and move past this age of rapid expansion of higher education to more of a commodity. And so where we have these state universities that are scaling up, I think that Antioch can continue to be Antioch if we're all collectively invested, if we're financially invested, if we're putting in the hours of the work and volunteering to continue and make this a sustainable place of an alternative to what's out there in the world. So I think that participatory democracy is the way that we engage and become invested in that.
A real quick response to the several questions. When I think of community, especially on Antioch, I remember coming to Antioch for the first time 3 years ago. I'm from Chicago originally, and it was a culture behind everything. Everything was reinforced by the culture. It was reinforced by action through example. When I think of community on Antioch, I think that everyone has an active role to play, regardless of what department they're in, what they do. Everyone has input and has a responsibility to uphold our culture and who we are and how we represent ourselves. And with that is kind of the biggest problem. First coming in, there was a strong leadership, there was strong buy-in and community governance. I think a part that was due to just kind of like this rally cry, this camaraderie around trying to get accreditation at first. And after that, with smaller classes, the culture wasn't reinforced the same way. So when I see that we don't have the same type of student participation, we don't have the same type of interests, largely is due to a lack of communication and that part of institutional knowledge that we talk about and bringing that culture forward. So buy-in is going to be super important in terms of having ownership and having people take responsibility. I think that now, talking to students across campus, everyone's really ready to get involved. They really want to take responsibility for seeing the changes that need to happen, that we want to see happen, not just relying on administration, not just relying on faculty to make those decisions for us, but really being able to take community governance to the level of real meaningful decision making. So we have a couple. I know Richard was on stack.
Yes,
So
and we have a stack. I just wanted to also resonate with a quote from Hassan Rahmanian, who just got awarded emeritus status by the Board of Trustees after teaching at Antioch for 30 years, over 30 years, and he, during Nonstop, he said, the notion of community defies politics. And I think what I understand by that is that politics is a power struggle, but community governance is not supposed to be constituencies fighting in a power struggle for their own interest. It's different constituencies having a relationship of solidarity with each other. Who is next on stack?
Richard.
Yes.
So it's 1, 2, 3, and then 4, and then 5. All right. 5, 6, 7. All right.
I'm not going to burden you with a question. I'm just going to make a comment. You heard that now, in order to make sure that representation continues on ComCil A and B, there are alternates, and I was elected an alternate, which means, and then I found out that the student who sucked me into doing this is off on co-op, so I'm actually on ComCil B, and obviously I'm not a student, I'm not faculty, I'm not administration, I'm an alum. I also live on the other side of US 68.
That's the class 4 best question.
That was the class 4.
Yeah, how was that over there?
My name's Andy Wagon, we should be introducing ourselves. I taught here from 72 to 84. I served 8 years on ADSL. I was hired with the Institute for Social Programs, Solution to Social Problems, and then chaired the Marxist Studies program. I left here and spent 8 years at Central State teaching, then headed up a university in Europe, and then now at Cal State LA. We've got 60 different languages spoken on campus. I've been dean of faculty there for some years. I'm struck by a few things. If you don't have some control over budget, then you don't have much control over anything. If you don't have some control over faculty selection, you don't have much control over anything. If you don't have some control over faculty tenure decisions, ditto. The whole point of ADSL was that it did, to a significant extent. Also, the structure of how people got elected. There were students elected by students, but there well actually by students. There were faculty elected by faculty, but there were faculty elected by the entire community. So, basically, to be very honest, if my place on ADSL was determined by faculty vote, I wouldn't have been on ADSL, but it was determined by community vote, so I was on ADSL. The staff had positions, and I don't know how you can possibly be considered a community if the people working on the grounds and the people working in the cafeteria aren't sitting at the table with you.
Yep.
It's not a community.
Here.
People that guard you when you sleep.
And then part of the involvement. I mean, the faculty have expertise, and I understand that. As I say, I'm dean of faculty at the university with 24,000 students. I understand how this works. I have 800 faculty and 800 adjuncts that work for me or work with me, and so faculty definitely have expertise in terms of curricular matters and what have you. But if one of their core functions is teaching, the evaluation of that teaching is really coming largely from the students and from their peers as well, if you're visiting each of those classes and what have you. So if you're not involved in the selection of faculty and getting a sense of who they are and sitting in on the usually the typical lectures they give as part of their recruiting process and have some interactions with them, how do you judge the nature of these people and how well they're going to fit into your community? If a tenure decision is made, if someone's been here, I don't know what rules are following now, but have been here for 6 years, and so for 6 years, students have been sitting in their classes and what have you, and the students aren't involved in the tenure decision, that makes no sense. Do traditional faculty coming out of traditional universities hate the idea of that? Probably, but they have to get over it. They shouldn't be at anyhow. And dealing with the budget situation. I mean, I think everyone understands the role the president and a CFO has on budget, and the ultimate role that the board of trustees has. That's there. There's a certain legality to that structure, but there are key decisions that are made in the budget that goes up to that level. And that really influences, especially if there's good arguments made as to why a little more money belongs here, a little less money belongs there. There isn't that. Wait, you left out this that should be in the budget.
Their value statements.
Their value statements. Their statements about where you want to go and why you want to go there. And so I guess there isn't an ADSL now, but I mean, I'm struck by the fact that no faculty is sitting up there with you. Right. That makes no sense to me. Really, there's no staff member sitting up there with you.
So I'm staff member on ComCil B.
Just so John Kay is a staff member, Kevin Magruder in the back is on ComCil B as well. And I am actually gonna, wonderful. We've got a room full of people that are community members that aren't right up here.
Kevin,
And
do you
so
wanna come sit here?
I am actually gonna if Lori could address some of that, because the kind of policy decisions that you're talking about, I think that you can speak to a little bit better than I can.
Well, I do just want to qualify, well, there's a lot of room for improvement in all of this, and, a bunch of us also are on ComCil B who are here in the back and wanting to, really excited about the opportunities to reinvestigate this. I don't want there to be, and there's lots of room for improvement in all of those spaces, but students do sit in budget and budget committee, and we've recently opened up budget discussions even beyond the budget committee so that all budget managers are in those. So there is a space for students in there, even if we can create and look at and explore ways to create more space and more influence and more community relations around those. Students sit in the space of, on all search committees as far as I know, unless there's a search committee that's gone forward that I'm not specifically aware of, but for faculty, for staff, across the institution, with at least all of the ones that I've been involved in or been involved in constructing or that I've been aware of. Students don't sit on tenure decisions, but they do have a role in evaluation, in both classroom evaluation and in writing the opportunity to write letters. The faculty personnel committee has even worked and has a proposal coming more in front of the board to expand the opportunities for students to have input through letter writing and other ways into tenure decisions, but they don't currently sit there. There are student representatives to the curricular, to the curriculum committee and things. So when we're talking about participatory democracy, does that fill the entire bill? No, probably not. But to say that but I also don't want to create a dynamic where there's sort of been no, or the misnomer that there's been no student involvement in any spaces like that. And Barbara, you wanted to?
No, we've got a stack here.
Well, we have a few people on our panel who just want to answer Lori Collins-Hall, and then we'll go back to our stack.
Sorry, Barbara, I'm cutting you off. I feel
No,
like
you're
I
not. Go ahead.
I mean, I don't disagree with you, Lori. I think for me, the thing, and I've been very involved in Antioch presently, and I deeply believe in it, and I think the people leading it, including the students, are some of the best people I've ever seen, and Antioch is in better shape than it ever was, and I wish I could have gone to this Antioch, because I would have been paying for what is around me versus living in a mold-infested shithole. But that said, I think then we actually had procedures that, and there was like governance structures that made it so student had the same buy-in as faculty and as staff and as administrators, and I don't see that happening now, and it's really happening out of good faith, which I think is awesome. But to me, I think to formalize that good faith in ways, because like in 20 years when maybe none of us are here, we need to make sure that the Antioch that we've built over many decades exists, is my point. And I'm not saying, like we've had many bigger hurdles than just shared governance to get through in the last many years. Obviously, we reopened a college and got accreditation, like that's pretty big. But, at the same time, like these students are the ones who did it, so they should have the equal governance power to that of anyone in this institution because of that.
Just a quick follow-up before we go into the SAC, I'd just like to say that I think that largely that's part of what ComCil B is going to aim to do, is to maybe centralize some of these procedures so that we have that buy-in and it's not so good faith, and that's the point of ComCil B.
That's great.
So I think it's Barbara's up next.
Barbara Winslow, 68, I'm also the chair of the board, and for those of you who don't know, when the college got reconstituted, we were committed, the board, of having a student on the board of trustees. We wanted, however, to wait until we had 4 full classes so that the students themselves could be involved in the process, the discussions about student representation on the board. At the last Board of Trustees meeting, we had an open meeting with the community to discuss this. A number of people expressed tremendous interest, support for this, and we now want to make it very clear that we are going to have this discussion, but one of the very important groups, if not the most important group we have to hear from, are the students. And it is going to be, in a sense, a discussion you're going to have in your governing organizations. I assume you want a representative or representatives on the board, but I'm not going to speak for you. How these people are chosen is going to be up to you. And I have said to Tom, and I'll say to all of you, that I will be very willing to come out to a meeting to talk about what the board is, what your responsibilities are, how we function, how we dysfunction, all these sorts of things, to encourage you to
get involved and press for a student representative or students representative on the board, you can see how my vote's gonna go.
I want a student seat on the board. How about you?
Thank you. We have Benny Eagleson next on stack.
I have a real quick, I just want to make a direct comment to that. And I think right there, and even we had like a meeting with some POC alumni, which was my first time talking to any POC alumni since come to the school.
What's POC?
People of color. And one, that's another way to instill and also to access institutional knowledge. But right there, as an example, I've met you before, but no kind of communication, no relationship has really been formed even with the board and the student body, faculty, student body, advancement, student body, administration, student body. There are links, but I think that's the point right there, is the communication, the relationship. It's not as strong as it should be, and that's going to have to be a culture change. So and I think a lot of these changes going to have to come with a culture behind it, a driving force in terms of like what's important, what's prioritized. Community meeting, our staff and faculty coming to every meeting, are they mandated, or is there some type of accountability for everyone to be at these open discussions? Because obviously we have a lot of seats here and a lot of input, a lot of knowledge, a lot of opportunity to come up with solutions that maybe some of us here don't have, are not in the question due to that.
We have Denny Eagleson next on stack.
I am an NAR graduate. I taught at the college for 20 years until it closed. I was part of Non-Stop. I came back to work at the Herndon Gallery for 2 or 3 years, and I'm deeply, deeply connected to this institution. I'm hearing that there's a call to reinvent Antioch College to make it appropriate, applicable for the 21st century. I see in President Manley a receptive, administrative leader who is really looking to change the structures here. So there is a new opportunity to throw it up in the air. I talk to faculty and administrators, and they are so burdened by the structures that exist and how many committees people have and how much responsibility they have. And you don't have time and opportunity to reinvent this great vision for the college. Now's the moment. It's going to be a little college for a while. Why not make it over so that ComCil is not just doing this sort of like in a silo, doing an exercise in self-governance, which means that people are not going to buy in. But make it be real, and make it be authentic governance where students are embedded in all those levels, and faculty are invited and invested in it, and the staff equally. So I think seize this moment, go for it.
If you want to respond to this.
I would just like to say that I completely agree, and I think that in my talking to other students on campus that they feel like this is the opportunity, and I'm seeing a lot more buy-in from students that weren't as invested before, just because we have, especially this quarter, only 66 students are on campus. There's such an opportunity for everyone to get involved, and there's so little coordination that has to go in compared to like when there are 115 students on campus. We have a real chance to make some substantial change, and I think we're all looking forward to that. Anyone else?
And to add on that, the implementation of faculty within decision-making bodies, such as ComCil and community governance at large, is vastly important. But it's now and for another reason why ComCil B needs to exist as a envisioning body and soon as implementation body, because often, like this, from what I've seen, there is a lack of connection to Antioch, to some of the faculty, and it's becoming more of a job and a necessity to serve on innumerable committees, and people get burned out, and that's why it's become a variety of shapes with a variety of connectors, and then hodgepodging a connector to connect between these various different things. And before then, you're having basically a garbage pile, so that's somewhat interconnected. No one can really explain how, but it is interconnected. But when you when you walk outside and you take a look, it's clusterfuck.
I think that's our motto.
Jerry Bello has been on stack for a little while.
I came down to save somebody the walk. Can I actually borrow the one without the cord?
Sorry. As long as you give it back in less than 10 minutes.
I'll move as quickly as I can, and I will attempt to be brief. I'll first start by communicating that I am acting under instructions. I will communicate those instructions. Philip Brigham very directly cautioned me last night.
Who are you?
Jerry Bello, class of 1997, never held a community office. Philip Brigham cautioned me last night to not tell the students what to do. My response last night was to quote Matthew Arnold, that would be sitting right behind Phil, what he said when other alumni were being unkind to students of the early 2000s and students proximate to the closure, where Matthew stood up for them and said, the kids are all right. And quoting the who. And I replied with that, and so that's where this is coming from. I'm going to attempt to synthesize things that I've heard discussed, both in this room and in others here, and some things that haven't been discussed but are not part of my direct institutional memory, but my historical study. And I'm going to ask you, out of these ideas that I throw out, are any of them useful? And if so, which? I heard earlier that there was a question of engagement. There was a time before I entered that community life was a credited course. Right before I entered, learning in school and community was an education course, and this was during April's tenure. Is community life being part of an academic requirement something that you consider educationally useful? One. And two, do you consider it as that mechanism being a useful engagement tool? When we talk about reinventing the college, that was talked about earlier in the other room, and as a startup, there's an unmet need, passion, tenacity. Okay, we got 2 and 3 pretty well covered. What is the unmet need, business case, market? I believe, as do probably many people in the room, that this planet is in peril and its people are in peril. What is the nature of that peril? Defining that falls under passion for each of us individually, not worth discussing. However, what's the unmet need? Well, what makes this institution unique as a business? Shiny Rock outside, got words on it, sort of addresses that problem. See passion. How does that, and how can that inform community? Fourth thing, it used to be that staff, both union and non-union, could take one course per semester for free, as well as there being both union and non-union staff on ComCil and on ADSL and participating. Do you consider this a useful tool in building community? If so, how? Out of these ideas that have, some of which have been touched on, some of which have not, and coming from a place of that honors history and tradition, but is in the spirit of the startup, what ideas that you have heard are most useful to you, because you're building the future of what I love.
So just to start, I think that a lot of those ideas are both useful and have been discussed in some capacity, whether it was on the Special Projects Committee on ComCil before, or have just been discussed in kind of the talks we've had thus far in ComCil B. Of course, we haven't met yet, but in email discussions, something like that. Something like the community life course, and receiving credit and receiving kind of making a requirement to be a part of the community as a whole is something that has been floated around a lot, and I think people are really interested in. Something like having direct staff involvement in other aspects of the community, especially academics, has been something that's been discussed very much. And so I think
it's actually true. People can take one.
They still can?
Yeah, and people have it in like 3 or 4 years.
Okay.
They have.
Got it. Okay. So apparently that's something we offer, but isn't being utilized. Is that correct?
I can speak to that.
Okay.
But not right now.
So I think a lot of those ideas are incredibly useful, and I'm incredibly interested in continuing the discussions we've been having. Although it's kind of hard for me to prioritize which ones are most useful for me right now, but do you have any thoughts on that?
I think the idea of having like union and non-union staff on ComCil would be really great, just in terms of reaching out more like to a larger demographic of staff, and also seeing how we could better reach out to that demographic, because they're part of the community, even if most of us students won't interact with them every day. Like I think one of you said before, it's good for institutional memory when you have members of that community there in a stable sense to provide that institutional memory in the long term. Which a lot of us lose over co-op, which a lot of us lose when the classes graduate. And so I think that would be a really, really cool idea. I really agree with most of what you said. We have to really do some deep investigating about what it is that we offer here and why we're special, because it's really hard sometimes to communicate to outside people, like why I go to Antioch. Like we have to be clear about why we're here and what we're doing in order for it to work. And then I also think that there's lots of opportunity here for change and for us to build something great in this next year and onward. It just means that we're going to have to do a lot of introspection and also relying on institutional memory, which y'all are giving us. So thank you for that as well.
So I was just going to say that also having union and non-union staff would be great. We don't have unionized staff right now. UE 767 is gone by the wayside since we closed. But I would love to have union staff back at this campus. It could be, and I just can only speak for myself, but bring back the UE.
Excuse me, for your information, when we founded the new college, the board said it was committed to, if the staff wanted to unionize, we would support it. As a board, we can't tell the staff to unionize.
Of course.
In direct response also, in terms of getting credit for community governance, I was on as a student representative on ComCil last term, and that was one of the things that we brought up in our agenda, and are looking towards to see the possibility of having that legitimized with registrar office, community life, etc. However, in terms of participation, it's really going to be on us for delegation, being able to create that structure to have people, not just work hard, but to work smart. I think that a lot of the projects that's happening, a lot of our wonderful staff, our wonderful faculty, administration is working on some really hard things, and have a lot on their plate. So I think we're in a unique position to really kind of take over and aid in those projects. So delegation.
I've been waved at by Eric Miller to wrap up this panel for the next event, but we still have maybe a few minutes. So, I'm gonna just ask all three CMs maybe to not give maybe advice because that is too paternalistic. But for the ComCil B, that is going to be a foundational and creative ComCil, if you have any words of inspiration and guidance. I'm going to start with Shelby and we can pass it.
I think just doing what you're doing. I mean, I think too, taking a lot of risks, because you, I think, are in a position where you can take risks and be bold. I mean, what's the worst? You piss people off? I mean, it's like a learning lab. Be creative.
Truthfully, what are they gonna do, kick you out? Nope.
I want to thank you for the opportunity to participate in this conversation, especially as you're getting kicked off, and let you know that not much. I mean, lots of food for thought here, but not exactly a lot of support and help for you at the moment. So I want to extend that and say I'm interested in participating going forward and supporting your efforts in that. And then just one other thing I had sort of realized is that you're so small right now that having an ADSIL and a ComCil doesn't make sense in my mind. But as ComCil could come up and take on the authority of ADSIL, that seems to me to be a workable strategy. And then after ComCil is mature, the organization matures more, you could decide if there's a need and what the need would be for other structures.
Y'all are just amazing. I'm super inspired. I think our operating structure is community government, and community government is our curriculum, and that it has to be. I think that has to be remembered in conversations, that it's not this extra thing, but it is our operating structure. And just kind of informally, the three of us spoke about possibly creating a former community manager working group that could support y'all in this work, bring some institutional memory as well as some tactics. And I mean, y'all are brilliant, so just as a space to bounce your ideas off of, to be able to do that for y'all feels great.
Thank you everyone for coming to the workshop and participating. In this room right now we're going to have the awards plenary, so you may stay if you want to watch Larry Rubin and Pavel Curtis receive their awards.